Hi, everybody. I'm joined today by James Nye, who's been a longtime supporter. And I happened to be on his YouTube channel the other day and saw one of his projects and thought I would love to talk to him about it and kind of see what we could work on together. And I kind of want to use this as an opportunity to, one, to showcase what James is doing. And then this project, I thought it'd be fun to look at it and see if there's any way I could take some of the things that he's struggling with and maybe work through some of them and give some ideas and suggestions back to him. And so this is a new kind of video that I haven't done before. I hope you guys enjoy it. And James, do you want to just tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and maybe what got you interested in game development and what you're doing with games right now?
Sure. I've been in the programming world for a long time. Back when I was about 6, my mom was learning to program and said if she can teach her 6-year-old how to do it, then she understands it. And it's just kind of kept my love of programming ever since, from the old 321 contact magazines and copying the basic games. But I had always done it as like a little side hobby. And I want to say probably about 6 months before I discovered your channel, I've decided to dive in full time and started making Python and JavaScript games. So, recreating Frogger and things like that. I really want to create something and put it out for Steam to say, look, I've published something. And that's what my end goal is. Right now, I'm just trying to build up a portfolio. Also, as a side job, I teach college classes, and I'm looking to start teaching an intro to game programming in the spring, and to get more experience in this and to learn more about game development so I can deliver a good, fun experience for my students.
Yeah, awesome. So, I mean, even though you have a lot of experience and background and, pretty technically savvy, it seems like game development is its own beast, I would guess, right? I mean,
yeah, that's a understatement. It's one of those things where you're like, this looks easy until you start doing it, and you're like, wow, this is so much more than I ever imagined it would be.
uh-huh. Yep. I remember having that epiphany over and over again each time I take on a new piece of game development. So we're going to look at your game Void Recall. And I think this would be a good opportunity for us to just be totally, honest with the viewers of my channel and show some of the pain points that we have as we make games. And we can talk about maybe where you're struggling and where you want help, or, the parts that are most difficult for you. So if you're ready, do you want to go ahead and let's pull up your game?
Okay, so this is my game, Void Recall. Pretty simple concept. You are a clone robot assassin that has no memory, hence the recall. You're going to uncover that stuff as you play through. So here's my first go at things, and I just call it Playground. If you guys have done Michael's tutorials, you understand where that name comes from. So let's just go ahead and we'll play through and look at all the different stuff I have going on.
I noticed you had some cool things in there, like the combat room, or combat test or whatever. So we'll have to look at that later. But go ahead, show us the level.
Yep. So right here, this is the original one. The camera's following the character. I've got keys so that you can unlock doors like this over here.
Nice.
And they're all color coded, so the green key goes to the green door.
Right, which plays really well with the black and white aesthetic.
Yep. Yeah, and just kind of commentary on that. My idea for this game is everything's going to be basically black and white, and so that when the colors do show up, they really pop and it really draws the player's attention, so they stand out. So right now, this is just like I said, playground. We're just testing. We got the flamethrower guys that have this nice little explosion of yellow when they die. This is basically using Michael's Marlowe, the platformer state machine and everything. So and then I've stolen the dash from the AARPG, things like that. They're all in here. I got the super fast run. So anybody who's gone through the tutorial will recognize a lot of this stuff. So we got the little flower guys. The idea is going to be like this poisons you, it takes away maybe some of your dash, or the idea also is as you kill enemies, you build up a blood rage thing, which will then flash the screen with color, and you'll get some extra bonuses to your attack and speed and stuff like that. So
I noticed with those enemies that they didn't stand out against the background as well as some of the others, and I know that's one thing that you and I discussed before, how the contrast with this black and white game has been hard to find a balance. Is that right?
Like when you're standing here against the white, you can clearly see them, but when we get into the darker stuff, it's a little bit harder to see. And then
Sword just fell on you.
Recognize the lasers that I've repurposed from your stuff.
Nice.
Then I've got bear traps. There's spikes over here. Then I want to get down to the actual boss, so that I can kind of show you some of the stuff that I have going on here. So this is going to be the head of security. My idea is he's the final boss of this vertical slice that I'm making, and each one of the bosses are going to build upon mechanics. So the first guy you fight's a shield guy, does knockback. Second guy you fight has a laser beam, and then when you fight the head of security, he's got the knockback, the laser beam, and he has an AoE. I might have a fourth boss in there that introduces the AoE.
Okay, cool.
But this, you'll notice, you lose him into the background because the background's so dark. He's real easy to miss, especially as he teleports around. And this is another pain point I have here with this is, if you notice the laser, where is he? There he is. Where he teleports and he uses the laser, it kind of looks a little weird with the rounded corner because it's just basically using the line in Godot and just trying to figure out a better way to make that stand out and show up.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I like the blue. It's kind of like a nice baby blue. I would say it was interesting when I heard the concept and looked at it. The colors, I really like the more pastel style of colors. But with the contrast issues, it does make those hard to stand out. So
yeah, and so things like the door will definitely stand out, but everything else is more muted and it's a little rough.
So talk to me about the art assets for this project a little bit.
Yeah, so the art assets here are made by a creator on itch.io. I'm going to say his name wrong. It's like pneumatic. I think there's a B in there.
Okay.
But if you search for the Dark series, you'll find his assets. And that's where I got all these. My Ninja Void, he's actually called, I think he's just called Assassin, is the name of it. The head of security is an Agent Guardian. I bought the assets pack, I want to say all of them for like $45 on one of the sales. So I've got those from the same artist, so I could hopefully keep the art style the same across everything. So all the enemies, everything feels the same, and we don't have the mixture of, you have watercolors here and then oil painting over there.
So with these art assets, maybe we'll put a link to that. So if people are curious and want to check it out, a little bit of free advertising for insert name here. I'm not sure what he's called, but yeah, pretty cool. So obviously you're kind of mashing that asset with some, just a few things like your background. Did that come from his packs, or where did the background come from?
No, the background came from another artist that I also bought a bunch of assets from. This background is actually part of his free legacy, 16-bit legacy, I think is what you call it. It's the same artist that I used for the Kite and Fall game.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I mean, there's some things that we could do maybe with the visuals and clean it up, make it so that you can see the player and the enemies a little bit more. I think that'd be an easy win for this game to make it more readable.
Yeah, because right now what I'm doing is this background's actually like a tealish blue, and I have a grayscale shader that I'm applying to it to give it the black and white look of things.
And I looked at your project, and you're using a custom shader on these textures, so you lose the ability to use like the modulate, right?
Right.
Which is maybe something I'll look at later in this video, but that's something to keep in mind when you're writing custom shaders, especially when you're working with 2D in Godot. Then you are going to maybe lose a little bit of the built-in functionality because, believe it or not, the default texture that these sprites use in Godot is a shader, and so when you write your own, you might lose something. But I really love these guys. I would love to see them stand out a little bit more. And they have a color associated with them, or no?
No, these guys, the flamethrowers, are black and white only.
Okay.
He does have another asset pack that adds a little bit of color to him. I think it gives him like a baby blue shade or something like that, but it's not full color.
Yeah, I could see, I don't know how you want to approach it, but adding color to them, even when they're just idle or walking, might be one way to make them stand out, or at least when he's doing his flame, like right there. That would be cool if there was some color. So maybe that's something else that we can look at.
Yeah, it'd be something that'd be really cool to look at. It might have to, because it's all one sprite right now. but maybe breaking out the flame into a separate sprite might be something that would work. The only thing I'm wondering about is if we do that color, kind of like the glow that is on his body when he shoots, if you can kind of see there.
Yeah.
There it goes. I don't know if that would still work or not, if he was still black and white with like a little bit lit up when the flame was in color, or if we need to colorize the glow on him too, or because so it stays connected, unified.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And it might not be super simple, but that's something I'll definitely look at.
Okay.
Why don't we have you next show us that combat playground that you've got set up?
Okay, so for testing in my game for my enemies as I add them, I want to have a quick way to fight them instead of having to run to where they are on the stage. So I created this combat test room, and in here we have just a option button, and we can generate the different types of enemies. So like here we have a ghoul. We can spawn him, and he does all of his AI in the room, and you can just keep spawning as many as you want.
This is awesome. This is a feature I wish I would have considered for the AARPG, but go on.
So we've got a couple different ones in here. The ones that we saw before for the flower enemies exist in here. The flame guys. This other guy's. I have to work on some of the mechanics for him a little bit because he's a little too aggressive. Because when he goes to sleep here and you walk up, he just quickly pops up
instantly
and shoots you.
headshot.
Yeah. So I have to add a little bit more delay there. I have a shoot timeout, so he doesn't just rapid fire on you. And I think I just have to start that timer after he wakes up instead of it just checking to see if the timer stopped or not. So
Right.
But one thing I want to bring up is this guy here, which I think is going to be my first boss. Right now, I'm just calling him a Sheilder enemy.
Okay.
And I'll spawn him in. And what he does is he's got that big, heavy shield. And one of his attacks is he'll slam it down on you. He also will shoot at you. But I'll just show you kind of how it works right now.
He looks awesome.
Shoots at you. Right now, he's still using the same bullet as the other, as the wheel bot. He's got a bigger shot, so I feel like that bullet needs to be more meaty. So I have to come up with some new art assets, the bigger bullet for him. And for some reason, right now, his AI is
stuck on the wall,
not turning around when you hit the wall. So I've made it so that you can dodge through his shots. When is it gonna? Oops. Let's try to get over here. The ow that you hear is definitely temporary. It just makes me laugh. But I've made it so like the bullets here when he shoots, if they hit the wall, they detonate on the wall.
That's nice.
And then, and then the thing that I'm kind of struggling with here is I kind of want to have it like a shield. He's invulnerable from the front, so you can just come in and start, hitting him with your sword, and it's just going to do like a ting, 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 maybe push you back a little bit. Right now, I have it just as a 0 damage hurt box, so if you run into it, it just pushes you back.
Right.
But when you like it more to be a ting, ting, ting type thing.
Right. So when you attack him currently and hit the shield, what's happening behind the scenes? Is there anything happening? Are you still working on that?
I've tried a couple things where it detects that he's hitting that hurt box. The problem I ran into a lot was because the way I've got the sword hurt box designed is for the maximum swing, and on the third strike, it's actually a little bit longer than the rest, and it was reaching across the shield hitbox into his actual hitbox.
Okay,
and that's where I was running into a lot of problems.
So when you're not supposed to damage him, you still can if you're... Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that's why I added like the knockback and stuff into him.
I love the asset for this guy. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then he has a nice little electrical short. When you kill him.
Sounds like a toaster blowing up or something.
Yeah, there's just some sound effects I have in that I've absolutely just fallen in love with, and that's one of them, with that quick little short and toaster pop sound.
Well, this is awesome, James. I mean, I think you've done some really cool work. And honestly, I think it's great that you did this based off of the little state machine we built with the platformer video series I did. I think where you've taken it is really, really where I hoped people would, kind of expand on it and make your own abilities. And you've got an attack, you've got dash. You can dash while you're in the air, right? I mean, it's pretty
Yep.
Pretty awesome set of features that you've got going on. So, one thing I wanted to point out as I was watching you in this combat room, that straight middle gray background that you've got here does make it so that the character and the enemies pop quite a bit more. And so I think that, that's an obvious target that we'll kind of shoot for with the level. Obviously, you want more to the level than just plain gray, maybe. And so we'll have to find a compromise. But, that's one of the typical challenges, I think, with game development and level design is making levels that are both aesthetically pleasing and beautiful, but also easy to read. I mean, I've even played games on the market where sometimes you get lost in the screen and you can't tell what's going on. You can't see what your character is doing or where he is. And so, yeah, that's not a challenge exclusively for us noobs. So at this point in the video, what I've done is I've invited James to get back to his normal life. I'm going to spend some time with you guys reviewing the project and making some tweaks and just kind of playing with it. And then once I finish the work, we'll jump back on with James and show him what we've done. But one of the things that we really spent just a little bit of time talking about, and it's going to be an easy win, was the contrast. One thing that's fun about what James is doing here with this game is this black and white aesthetic for the game. And of course, there's hints of color, and that kind of plays off pretty nicely. The downside is the player and some of the enemies, they don't stand out against the background too well. Obviously, the keys and the color are super obvious, how those are related. But some of these enemies, in particular, some of the smaller ones, let's see, there's a small guy over here, they just don't stand out quite well enough. And even the player itself could get lost in the game, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this background that we've got here in this playground level and make some adjustments to it, see what we can do to increase the contrast in the game. All right, for demonstration purposes, I have a screenshot of the game running in here, and I've kind of masked out everything that's a player or an enemy or something like that, right? That's not the background, just so I can demonstrate what this is going to look like. And let me go ahead and just take this layer, duplicate that stuff. Okay, so what we need to do is increase the contrast. And if you're not really familiar with basic color theory, contrast is how much variance or difference there is between two colors. So the more difference is, the higher contrast it is. Black and white is like maximum contrast, right? You can't get more different than black and white. And so what we want to do is we want the characters to have high contrast against the background so that they stand out more easily. Especially like, look at this guy with the red eyes. He really doesn't stand out very much because he's mostly black and the background is very dark. Our player and these guys are standing out okay because they're in front of a white piece of background right now, right? But let's go ahead and just show you what I mean with some flat colors. So I'm going to drag in here, let's see, a new fill layer. Okay, so you can see right now with a black background, not working so good because the characters have a lot of black. If we were to drag this to white, now white works pretty good because the characters are mostly black, but they have some white bits, like I'm thinking of the sword and stuff. I mean, it's a light gray, right? But those colors now aren't standing out as much as we would like them to. So what we can do, because our characters and entities have kind of a mix of black and white, and actually a really good example is the platforms on this, right? And I'm not sure if James is sticking with the white outline and black interior, but you'll lose the white outline completely with this color fill, right? If I were to bring this to a middle gray, that's going to give us a maximum contrast between white and black without being either one, right? Like it's the furthest we can get from white and black and keep that amount of contrast difference, okay? Right? The closer this color gets to white, the less contrast with white and more with black. Okay. So I'm going to go for middle gray. And you can see now everything stands out. You can see the sword. You can see the little white hose off of this guy's back. You can see this black character just fine. The question you probably are thinking is, well, does he want a flat background? And probably not, right? So what do we do from this detailed background to this flat one? And one simple thing we could do is just decrease the color contrast in that background so that it's, got some variation, but they're all close to this gray color that we've selected, right? Like the brightest color is still a gray and the darkest color is a darker gray. Now, because I tend to work in Aseprite, and I know a lot of you are, and you may not have Photoshop, I'm actually going to show how we can achieve this background, gray color within Aseprite here. And what I've got, this is actually the background that James is using in his game. It's got a color. He has a shader applied to it that converts it to black and white, but it still keeps the darks and the lights within his game. So it still has this same kind of contrast ratio. Now, if he was going for a full color game, it might be okay to use this kind of as is with the blue, because that would help the character stand out a little bit. But I would still suggest, even if that be the case, that you keep the contrast in mind. In fact, for those of you who may have some training in art like I do, one of the things that you will learn in color theory is if you're trying to understand your values, how the lights and darks play off of each other, even when you're creating an artwork in full color, convert it to black and white. Take a picture. That's what we did. Take a picture, change it to black and white, and see how your paints looked in black and white. Now, this isn't something that you necessarily are doing while you're painting all the time, right? But it gives you this clear view of like, oh, I see, like that color needs to be darker. There's not enough contrast, right? It just takes some training to see the contrast. The more colors you have involved, the harder it is to see it and work with it. Okay, so we're going to go in here and I'm going to take this layer and I'm just going to duplicate it. Okay. And let's just go ahead and select it and do a layer adjustment here in Aseprite. Edit. And then we'll come down here. There's got to be one of these adjustments. Let's first do hue and saturation. Now, because he's using this in black and white, instead of applying a black and white filter, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop the saturation, -100. And now it's become a black and white image. Okay, so now we've got the comparison. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so we can see some of this a little bit more. Now, what I'm going to do again is I'm going to come in here. And in fact, let me go ahead and duplicate this layer again, because I think what I would like to do is try a couple different versions. So I'm just going to go duplicate, and I'm going to duplicate it once more. So we'll do one that's a little bit more high key, a little bit brighter, and one that's a little darker. So let's do the light color first. I'm going to say edit, adjustments. Once we've converted it to black and white, there's a couple ways you could do this: brightness, contrast, color curve. Even the hue saturation has like a lightness value. The simplest way is going to be brightness and contrast. So brightness will brighten it, right, or darken it. Now, this isn't doing a great job of bringing out the blacks, but if we drop the contrast, now we're starting to get kind of the style of image we want. In fact, if I put the brightness back at 0 and drop the contrast all the way to -100, you just end up with a middle gray, right? Which is kind of what we tested in our Photoshop example, right? Just like that. Okay, so I'm going to drag the contrast up a little bit, and I'm going to do it so that I still keep some of the detail. And background elements don't need a lot of detail, and especially in this game, because we're doing this black and white aesthetic, the detail is going to be a little bit less important. So let's do a high key one. I'll drag the brightness up to maybe about 30. Okay, so there's one version. We'll do the same thing on this layer, except we'll do it a little bit darker. Drag that contrast down, drag the brightness down. Now, I think this dark one's going to be tough. It's that, like that black enemy, I'm thinking he's not going to stand out against it. So I'm going to actually brighten it up just a little bit. Okay. So now we've got two versions. We've got a brighter and a darker. I'll go ahead and save these and we'll put them in the game and just show you what they look like. Okay, we're back in the project and you can see I've got that black full contrast background in there, right? And this is in this background parallax 2D node. He's got a sprite 2D in here. Okay, and you can see, as I mentioned, he's got a shader. I'm going to go ahead and clear the shader. You can see this in its regular color. It's been modulated as well. I'm also going to clear that. Okay, so this is now what that image or texture looks like in the game. And just for fun, let's go ahead and run this. You can see it with the blue. Doesn't really fit what James wants. You can see that that little one bad guy, he stands out a little bit better, but honestly, the contrast is still pretty crummy, right? For what we want. So let's go ahead and swap out the sprite on this. So let's try first this darker one. Boom. Okay. So we've swapped it out. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay. You can see now the player stands out pretty good on this, right? In fact, just about everything does. There's some middle grays on these little flamethrower dudes on their masks and stuff that aren't standing out super clearly, but in general, we've got a lot more readability on this screen than what we had before. Okay. Now for fun, we can go ahead and just swap in this light version and run it one more time. Okay. And there we go. So both of these are pretty suitable. It's really going to come down to the mood or the goal of your level design, you know, how you wanted that to look. Okay. This one I think is a little bit too bright. So if I were going to just go with one of those two, I would opt for the darker one. But of course, this could be tweaked to your heart's content. The only thing that I like about this one better than the other one is the mask on the little flamethrower dude stands out a little bit better, but that's a pretty minor. So there we go. That's one quick way to implement this, and that's a real easy win. Obviously, your mileage is going to vary with your games. If you've got a full color game, though, you still need to keep this kind of concept in mind. If your character is predominantly blue and the blue sky in the background maybe is too similar and matching, then you're going to run into contrast issues. So you would want to consider changing that, right? Now, while I'm in here, I just couldn't help but look at how James has set up these little flame guys. And I think he might have followed another tutorial that did this, or he came up with this concept on his own, but I like it in general. He's got a shader attached to the sprite on this guy. And you can see it's called a flash shader. And the purpose of it is so that you can make the enemy flash using a shader. I think he's just tweening or adjusting this blink color and intensity right here, right? To make him flash. Maybe when he takes damage, when the player hits him, things like that. I've added a new variable to the shader called shade color, because the downside of doing a shader like this is that you lose the ability to come in and adjust the modulate on this character, right? You see I can drag it to red and it doesn't modulate. And I think it would be cool to add some color to these enemies when certain things happen. So without modulate, how are you going to do it? Well, we can kind of simulate the same kind of colorization that modulate does utilizing this shader. And so I've added a new uniform parameter called the shade color. You can see it's a uniform vector 4. And this little hint tells us that it's a color over here. And so if I pick, let's say, red, what we can do is, you see in James's code, the line here that adds the color is right there. It's that mix function. I'm going to comment that out and uncomment my version. I'm using the same mix, but then I'm multiplying the color by the shade color. What that will do is it's going to darken it. Like if it's white, it gets darker. If it's gray, it gets darker by that color. You could also do something like maybe an add, but you can see how that does the whole thing and it doesn't take any alpha into account. So you could work on that. You could correct that issue. But I think for what he's doing here, this simple multiply is something that we can do. And then, like, let's say this guy should turn yellowy orange when he shoots off his flamethrower, like this, right? We could set that to the shade color. And then we can even animate this property. So I'm going to go ahead and reset this. White should be the default. Save that. So this is actually really cool. This is something I haven't done a whole lot, but you see the shade color here. I've got when I'm looking at my animation, I've got the idle animation selected and I've selected my sprite 2D. This shade color actually has a key, so I can keyframe it. I'll say, yeah, let's create a keyframe on that. And then if I come down to, say, one of his attack animations where he's breathing fire, I could come in here, tweak the shade color to whatever I want it to be, right? And then key that. I'll go ahead and create that keyframe. And I'm going to copy that one. And then one of these attacks, I think, is the beginning and the middle and the end, something like that. This looks like the end. Let's go ahead and select our sprite. And sorry, I had to cut that out. But if I deselect the flame and reselect it, I got my little keys back. So let's just add one here. And then we'll fade it back to white by the end of the animation. Okay, so we've got a little fade out. And then attack 1 probably needs to fade in. So let me just go ahead and copy that track. I'm going to say copy tracks, shader parameter. And this is just something I love about Godot. You can animate just about any property. So let's see, paste tracks. And we just need to swap them in this case. Swap the order. So let me grab that orangey yellow. Okay. So let's go ahead and run the game and see if I can get one of these flame guys to do his thing. Uh-oh. My player's animated. Okay, it's working. It's working on him. Ooh, stop it. He's turning yellow when he blows his flame. I like that. Now, the thing that's happening here that's kind of goofy is I didn't think about it, but I'm animating a shader that's maybe applied to the player as well. Let's just go look at I think the assassin, that's our player. Yeah. Let's see, does he have this same material on his sprite? Indeed we do. It's set to white here. Let's go ahead and run it again. I'm not sure why he's getting the yellow. Now, one thing that I was going to say is, okay, that seemed to fix it. Sometimes when you set up shaders, depending on how you set it up, they can share parameters. That's not the case here. I thought it was for a second. It must have been picking up a false state, but there we go. Now we've got a way to animate the color of this flash shader that James has built. So he can use that to add color to his enemies that are black and white normally. Now, one thing that I've done that I haven't really demoed the work I've done, but I've gone through and I've worked a little bit on this player controller. So James had used my platformer controller from that little series that I did, and it was a little bit too floaty for this kind of game, and so I increased things like the acceleration while you're in the air, so you can jump up and go around these corners. I also worked a bit on the dash move, so I added a little bit more speed to it and a cool update to the trailing effect just to make it colorful and fun. And then lastly, I've added some audio effects to the when you hit an enemy. So let me just stop talking so you can hear that. And I did that mainly so that when we come into a boss, we can tell when we've hit him, because I was having a hard time knowing if I registered a hit on the boss here. So yeah, need a little bit more juice there. Now I think that's probably something James was going to do, but just showing what I've been working on while I've been tinkering around with this. But while we're at it with this boss, James wanted some feedback on how to make that laser attack there a little bit more, I don't know, better. And so we've got some things like it doesn't match the pixel art style super well, maybe, is one of the issues. Where it emits from the head and it collides with the ground. It's just that rounded edge. And James doesn't really like how that looks. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. Now I'm looking here at the boss room that James has built for this guy. He's got this ancient guardian boss, and there's these different teleport points, attack points. And you can see that they're named AoE or laser or blast. And then he's got in his script, it's kind of like a state machine. Depending on which of these points it chooses to teleport to, it plays the proper kind of state and attack. And so we've got two spots where it could be laser attack, and it's in the top left and top right. So if this guy ends up in one of those, that's when he does that laser attack. Pretty cool. Now, looking at this boss, the laser attack here, the laser attack is right here. It's set up, he's got this ray cast that points towards the player, and he's got a line, which is pretty cool, right? And it just draws this. And then he's got a texture setup that animates. You can see here he's got 2 frames on it. So yeah, I'm going to see what we can do with this. I'm not sure the best approach, but I feel like we need to add something to the beginning. Maybe get it to come out of the eye a little bit better, and then get something at the end where it hits the ground so that we have just like a nice beginning and end to this instead of these rounded corners. Now, one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this ray cast in this line, and I'm going to make it draw behind the parent. So there's this show behind parent here. Okay, that's going to help occlude some of the weirdness that happens from that line. And then what I've done is I've created a new little animation sprite that has like the eyeball glowing explosion effect. Looks like this. And I've kind of synced that up with the head. So when we run the game and fight the boss, you'll see that it improves where the laser emits a little bit. There we go. So that's a little bit of an improvement. And I think maybe the concept could be taken a little bit further, but you can see now it looks a little bit less wonky. It's not like this weird circle coming out of his face. Now we need to basically just do the same thing to the end of that laser where it hits the ground. James has already added some particles emitting when it hits the ground where it's hitting. It's just not quite enough to cover up that rounded edge. So my really simple solution to this is this little sprite here that I've created. I mean, this is kind of a cheesy, simple animation, but it will serve the purpose. The idea is that we're going to kind of mask the rounded corner of the laser beam with this rounded edge of this sprite, and then the end where the laser's coming from is going to have this little animated bit coming off of it. And so you could take that concept and take it further if you were doing something similar. And then I'll go over to Godot here. What I've done in Godot is I've got this laser collision in here, and I've hooked it up into one of the scripts that James has written. And in here, I'm just positioning the laser, and then I'm calculating an angle. And you can see I'm getting the angle, and I'm calculating it based on the collision normal, which is going to tell us The normal is kind of like the facing direction of the plane that it hits. It's like a perpendicular direction. And since it's in a vector 2, we have to convert it to an angle, and then we can assign it here to the rotation. And so the end result of this is pretty simple. And while it's not perfect or the most beautiful, it serves the purpose that we need, and you know, serves as like a basic implementation. So let me just run into the boss room here, and we'll see when he shoots his laser. I've set it so he always shoots it. It's going to be facing perpendicular to the surface that it hits. Okay. So there we go. That just kind of helps mask that rounded edge. Got blasted in the face. The rounded edge of that laser there. And I noticed a really fun feature while I was playing around with this. With the dash, you can move, you can change the direction. I don't know if this was the original intention that James had. I haven't talked to him about that, so I'm going to ask him. But I could see some fun gameplay mechanics arising from that. So anyways, there we go. Okay, so the last thing I want to look at that James and I had discussed was this Sheilder enemy. And so I'm going to spawn one here in this little, I don't know what we call this, the combat test room that he created, which is really awesome. So here's the Sheilder, and you can see that James has got it so that it's displaying the current state that he's in. And he's got this shield that he smashes at you. And I'm not supposed to be able to damage him from the front, which I think is working. James thought that maybe it might be a little bit buggy and maybe there's some feedback missing. When you hit him from behind, he does say ow, which is kind of fun and comical. But there we go. We've got this Sheilder. And so we're going to work on looking at what we can do to improve him. And we're going to kind of review the detection code. I hit him in the back enough times that he died. You know, the hit detection code to see if there's any way that we can improve it in a simple fashion. Okay, so we can see looking at this little enemy that he's created, there's two hitboxes here. There's this red one on the back, which is the one that you can actually use to damage the enemy. And then there's the hitbox shield here in front. And we're going to have to look at the code to kind of get a sense for how these are working, I guess. So let's open up the Sheilder code here and let me dig around and see if I can figure it out. Okay, so he's got his hitbox shield. He's connecting to this shield hit function, which right here will say ting, and you can see it's doing some setting the hitbox monitoring off and then back on. There's a little bit of a timer, right? So I think what's happening here is he doesn't want the regular hitbox to be able to detect hits after he's been hit by the shield. And I think that's okay, and I like that he wants to play a ting sound effect. We added something like that previously, or I did as I was playing around, so we'll kind of integrate that. But let's look at what we can do to maybe try a different solution and see if it's any better. Okay, I've gone through and kind of reviewed the code that we have in here, and I've commented out this section that was previously being used when the player hit the enemy. And this was only supposed to happen when the player hit the part of the enemy that would damage him, I think. But I've commented that out. And to show what I've done is I've come in here and I've kind of disabled this shield hitbox, so we can kind of ignore that. And I've left the enemy with a single hitbox now. And so I've connected this inside the Sheilder script. And here's what I'm doing. I'm making a copy of this hurtbox object that's getting passed in because I want to be able to change the damage value on it sometimes without changing the player's damage value. Okay, so what I do is I just make a copy and I set the damage there, and then we'll pass this in down here below. And I just check the direction of the player, and I'm getting a normalized vector 2 and looking at the x-coordinate. So the x-coordinate is going to be positive or negative. It'll be negative if the player is to the left and positive if he's to the right. I've changed some other code in here too, so I know that the direction the enemy's facing, which will also be positive or negative, okay? And then I just do a simple check. So if I'm going to multiply these two values, the enemy's facing direction and the direction to the player, and if I multiply them and the value is greater than 0, I know that it was hit from behind. So what happens here is if the enemy is facing to the right, then his facing direction will be a positive number. That's this dir right here, okay? And then if the player is also to the right of the enemy, then the way we're doing this math, right, that means we're going to get a negative number because the player's position is going to be greater than the position of this. So maybe we could swap these and it would make the math make a little bit more sense. But in that case where the enemy's facing to the right and the player's in front of him, then we're going to get a false. We're going to get a negative number. Okay, so that means it's going to come down here. It means we hit the front. But if the player and the enemy are facing opposite directions, then we should end up with a positive number. And again, I think if we were to maybe swap the way we're doing this math, then it would change how we would determine this, right? And maybe that would make more sense. But let me just show you what that does in practice. So now using one hitbox, we're just going to check if the player's in front or behind. So when we spawn a Sheilder, if I jump in front of him, you can see when I hit him, I'm not going to do any damage. And I've added that clank sound effect, so it's obvious you're hitting his shield. But from behind, he is taking damage, and eventually he'll die. All right? So kind of a simple fix. This is essentially the same thing that James was already doing. It's just an alternate way that I devised to do it, and it may come with some drawbacks, but it also cleans up some parts of the code. So I'll leave that up to James to see what he wants to do with it, if he wants to take it or leave it. I did remove a couple other bits from this that need to be reintroduced into the code. Like, I think if the enemy is facing away from the player and he takes damage, then he's going to turn. Okay, so we could do that. We could do that here in the code. And now when I reintroduce this code here to make him change direction when he takes damage, we'll test that. You'll see that the enemy becomes a bit more difficult to fight because you hit him once and he'll face you. So here we go. Smack. There you go. Now he's going to face us and attack. We're going to have to be a little bit tricky. And there we go. So at this point, I'm going to share some of my ideas with James and get him back on the line, and we'll see what he thinks and maybe check in on the progress that he's made. So James has been working on Void Recall on some of the time when I've been working on it. So he's got some changes. And James, why don't you tell us what you've been doing with the project?
Yeah, I've been trying to expand upon the Metroidvania aspect of it. I've rearranged the rooms, I've added some textures, I've changed out the boss fight locations, and added in a couple new enemies, and made it a little bit more playable and actually enjoyable. So excited for what changes Michael has done to it, and looking forward to incorporating some of those into the game. And hopefully, in my video at the end of August, you'll see all that stuff all nice and meshed together.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. And I'll make sure we put a link to that in the description. So hopefully we'll have that when I put this video live. But if not, then it'll be there pretty soon. So let's go ahead and just go over what I've done. And this is what I've been working on, James. I've gone in and made some changes to a couple things on the player, actually, that I want to show real quick. So I added some extra sound effects and some things to the enemies there we'll talk about. But yeah, there's extra sound effects with the sword because I felt like that was one thing that was a little bit lacking, and probably something you're already going to work on, but something I thought I would touch real quick. Oh my gosh, why can't I jump up there? I'm gonna have to cut that out. Okay, so there's some new kind of meaty sounds there when you hit the enemy, and of course I died. Did I not get the key? Let's grab the key here. And I've worked on just kind of the responsiveness of the character, so I've made it so that he's a little bit more maneuverable in the air, because the way that this game plays, it's kind of fast, but too much acceleration and deceleration kind of was counterintuitive with the speed of the game, if that makes sense.
Yep, totally.
And then obviously you saw that I've added some extra colors to these enemies by kind of updating your shader code just a little bit. But yeah, that kind of adds some extra fun punch of color, I think, when the enemies are attacking in the game, and helps them stand out to the player. Also, as I worked on the player himself, you can see the trailing effect and the dash effect has been adjusted a little bit. I even sped it up a bit because I wanted to just kind of, I guess, double down on the speed of the game. But yeah, so just kind of some fun changes. And then once we get to let's get over to that head of security guy. So here with the head of security, now I've updated mostly just with his laser attack, and there it goes. You can see that we've covered up some of the eye and added a little bit of extra effect where the laser's hitting the ground, just to make it look like it fits the world a little bit better. And those are things that you might need to work on a little bit more to get them to look how you want, but just some basic improvements. And you know, the reason I added the sound effect to the attack here is on this boss in particular, which you'll notice he only does the laser right now. I did that. I wanted it to be obvious when I hit him, because I noticed I was having a hard time determining if I'd actually landed a hit on the boss. So there we go. I don't know if you have any questions about this or anything that you want to share with the audience that you haven't already.
I mean, I'm looking forward to tuning a little bit more of this guy and making him the end boss of this, hopefully, 3-level Metroidvania game I have. And this improvement already, just with the eye laser, looks awesome.
So, James, thank you for sharing your game with me and letting me kind of sit and chat with you. I want to point out to our viewers that James is an awesome part of my community, the Michael Games community. He's highly active in the Discord server that we have, helping people and answering questions, which is something I greatly appreciate. But he's also got his own YouTube channel. He's got an itch.io page where he's putting out some of the little game jam projects he's working on. So I want to invite you guys to check those things out. I'm going to put links to his content in my description. And James, is there any last words you have for the viewers?
No, but what I am looking forward to is you guys playing my games and hopefully enjoying them. But again, any feedback you can leave me would be much appreciated.
Awesome. Yeah, and thank you. And as always, we'll see you next time.